Off to a great start. We got a lot of work to do. I'm really pleased to be here with my partner, Susan Beisowitz, a lot of folks in the legislature. By the way, a lot of the initiatives we've taken have been done on a bipartisan basis. We don't always do things that way in Hartford, and we're making progress here, especially on the wind power vote we recently took. And a special thanks actually to all the advocates who are here today. You keep our eye on the North Star and how much we have to do. Katie reminds me every day that climate change is happening faster than we thought. Climate change, the band formerly known as global warming, and it's impacting us in significant ways as a state. And going back 15 years, when Governor Rell, started putting in place studies to figure out how we should be addressing this as a state. And Governor Malloy took the lead as his executive order, what we can do in terms of our state institutions to take the lead. And the first executive order that was some prodding from Katie, we did, which was working, physician lead, yield ourselves, take the lead by example, state of Connecticut. And what we're doing in terms of efficiency for our state buildings, what we're doing in terms of solar powering our state buildings, what we're doing in terms of moving our fleet to getting off of fossil fuels for our state fleet and our municipal fleets. That was what we did in our first order. And this is our third order. And as Susan, or as Katie pointed out, we're accelerating because what we have to do. We're accelerating not only in terms of what we have to do in terms of resiliency, what we have to do in terms of all of our substations and Amtrak and the water treatment, all of which are at risk, all of which are in the floodplain. A floodplain that used to be a 100-year storm is now becoming a 50-year storm. It's becoming a 10-year storm. And if we don't take care of that, it's going to be Hurricane Sandy times 3, and the cost to this state will be devastating. And it's not simply about saying we're going to move having a carbon-free electric grid from 2050 to 2040. It's really about what's the state going to look like in 2040? And how I want this to take the lead in terms of other states around the region and around the country going forward. And Connecticut's been an extraordinary leader here. When it comes to our electric grid, as Katie pointed out, we made extraordinary progress there. But look, I've been in office for a month before I started seeing those headlines, Dominion going to pull the plug, Millstone no longer with us, rolling blackouts anticipated, and yet this Dominion, nuclear power, Millstone, provided about 50% of our carbon-free power as well. And if that had gone off, not only what that would have meant to us in terms of reliable, predictable power, but also what that would have meant, we would have been reverting back to fossil fuels and going the exact wrong direction. So when we got that notice from Dominion, I said, all right, Katie, well, thank God we got the renewables. We're ready to go, hit the ground running. And she said, yeah, we'll have that ready to go in 10 years. So we made the deal. We've got Millstone, for the near term. But more importantly, we are doubling down on our renewables. We're going to be ready to turn the corner. The first thing we did, again, is thanks for a lot of the folks here in this room and the legislature, are quintupling our commitment to wind power, taking the lead there, making sure that over the next 10 years it will represent a third of our power and more going forward. Look, this is not only about a carbon-free future, it's also about our economic sustainability. I mean, right now, we're at the end of all the lines when it comes to natural gas and oil. It costs us a fortune. It means we have the highest cost of electricity in the world, and a lot of it is dirty. And by moving to wind and solar and renewables, that means it's now locally based, locally controlled. We're no longer at a disadvantage compared to our peers. The wind power, we're working in collaboration with Gina and Charlotte, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. We're going to be purchasing that wind power together, bringing down costs, allowing us to get more economies going forward, and that will be a significant piece of our energy future. Going forward from there, what we can do in terms of solar. Brian Garcia is here. What we've got to do, let's start funding the Green Bank again. What happened for the last 5 years? We made a deal with people. People always talking about sweeps. This is money that's supposed to go to energy efficiency, and that's what we're doing. We started that on the first day of this our new budget. And what that means in terms of middle-class homeowners who are often living in incredibly leaky homes, paying a fortune to heat and air condition their place, what we can do with energy efficiency, what we can do with insulation, what we can do in changing out a lot of their utilities. Somewhere here is Steve Cowell. I was on the board of Conservation Services Group. That's what they did in terms of making the world more efficient in that sense. And as Katie said, you know, the cheapest power is the power you don't have to use. It also represents thousands and thousands of good-paying jobs. It does a great job in terms of reducing our footprint. That's energy efficiency. The Green Bank, in terms of what we got to do to continue to fund and accelerate funding for solar power, again, locally based clean energy is a big piece of our future. So when we say, you know, an electric grid that is carbon free within 2040, that's just not, it's about where we want to be as a state. That's about moving our heating and air conditioning, or heating certainly more to electrical, bringing down those costs. Because obviously, heat and air conditioning is the second biggest source of, after, you know, power is the third, heating is second, and finally is transportation. Transportation is still the biggest contributor to CO2 emissions. And what's the state going to look like in between now and 2030 and 2040? How does transportation play into that? Well, right now it's obviously cars and gridlock on our highways, more and more truck traffic going forward. Anything we can do to get those cars moving on the highways, even better, off of the highways, more people in the bus service. We're talking about having bus service where we reduce the price down to $1 a ride, making it easier for people to get around, making an emphasis upon transportation, public transportation, rail, again, easier for people to go, making our cities major transportation hubs, the same way they were when they were originally, you know, founded a century ago. And what does that mean? That means that not only a commitment to people being able to be in our cities where young millennials want to be, where you can walk to work, you no longer have to drive to work, easier to take that public transportation, that bus. It's also invaluable for the future of our state and our small towns, keeping our open space, easier for those that live in a ring community to be able to get to that city going forward. And in terms of what I believe in, and I was on the board of the Greenwich Land Trust many, many years, and what we can do to preserve our open space is all about the character of our state. So when we talk about what we're going to do for our energy future, what we're going to do for our green future, our environmental future, what it means to be zero carbon in 2040, it's really about a vision for our state and what we want to look like in 2040. And I'll just leave with a point that we can't do it without each and every one of you. Frankly, we're doing it without a lot of help from Washington right now. This is why we're able to have to take the lead here in our states. And I've got great partners in Charlie Baker and Gina Raimondo, and I went for a fishing trip with Andrew Cuomo. And so our neighbors are on board. We know we're going to take the lead on this as a region. We're going to show the rest of the country what we've got to do. We're teamed up with, California and others when it comes to the energy efficiency standards, what we got to do on mileage and such. You know, we're going to step in where Washington maybe steps back. And it's about what type of a state we are and what we want to say to our the next generation going forward. This is the place we want to be. We want to call home with values that are dear to us and a future that we're proud to be able to leave to our children. That's what we're doing here today.
Thank you so much.